I'm
I
calling
am
the meeting. Thank you. Calling the meeting to order at 5:33. Let the record show all council members are present. Councilmember Cobb is on Zoom. We will have invocation by Anjanette Wickerson and Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Solomon. Please stand.
Hey there.
Please bow. Eternal God, we stand before you humbly and submissive to your will. We are thankful for this opportunity to pray together and to experience your amazing grace and mercy together. We implore your Holy Spirit to fill this chamber with unyielding peace, respect, honor, and understanding. We ask that you continue to watch over our city and those around us. We ask that you bless our leaders with wisdom, discernment, knowledge in all that they do, say, and think. Grant them favor in their decisions, increase their faith, and prepare them to pursue your excellence in their work and service for others. Draw them to you and cause them to recognize, accept, and fulfill your purpose for our community and all who reside in it. Impart your wisdom and revelation to them as they move our city forward. We ask you to make all of our hearts pliable, willing, and obedient to your will. Cause each of our lives to glorify your name. Thank you, Father, for your guiding hand and loving touch. Let all that we say and do be pleasing unto you this day. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please take your seat. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councilmember Solomon. Councilmember Adams.
Madam Mayor, second.
All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 7-0. We will now start off with citizen comments. Michael Fornino. Good evening. You have 4 minutes.
Specifically jumping back and forth between items 12 and 13. Anybody who's been paying attention knows that this is a foregone conclusion that you're going to vote for it. So I say go ahead, do it. This plus the water pressure and all that doesn't affect me, so go ahead, do it. I mean, person who is saying it's going to do this, going to make a lot of money off of it, and it's going to happen a lot faster than what's been advertised. We know that. Go ahead, please do it. Vote for it. I mean, we obviously, who have argued against this sort of thing in the past, don't know what we're talking about, where 600 new houses are going to go.
Francisco, is there a problem?
There always seems to be during citizens' comment. But 600 houses, I mean, those of you, many of you who are in the real estate game magically aren't going to make any money off of this. I mean, I guess you're going to make your money off of medical supplies or selling junk somewhere. Obviously, nothing to do with this. I mean, many of you have gotten on the council purportedly to do good, and
Mr. Fornino, I apologize. I don't know. Ms. Kagan, can you check out why we're getting so much feedback?
Madam Mayor, for the record, folks who watch this at home say that this happens consistently during citizens' comment, where the
Okay.
audio and the video blanks out, gets distorted, whatever, just for what it's worth.
So Janelle, the mic, so is both of them all going to get feedback? And I hope y'all stop the clock on his time, please. Can we just give him back 4 minutes? I mean, is it 3 minutes or 4?
I'd be satisfied with 3.
We'll start back over. I apologize for that while they're working on that. Okay, Mr. Fernino, I apologize. You're up.
As I said, go ahead. We who have been paying attention know that this is going to pass, and 600 houses, nobody in the real estate game in this town is going to make any money off of that. Water pressure, obviously, the citizens who complain that this is going to affect their water pressure further and all the traffic concerns, the city obviously says that that's a figment of their imagination. If they were so concerned, they would have turned out at the ballot box, and knowing that you folks were going to vote for this anyway, they would have put it in a position where you would not be here to vote for it. So by all means, please, vote this enthusiastically. I want you to do it. I want you to make good on all of your promises and everything else, because many of you have gotten on council and in elected office to do good, and in the end, we can see you all doing very well indeed. So please, do this. This doesn't affect my water pressure, it doesn't affect any of my traffic pattern. Go ahead, do it. I mean, if the people in this town actually cared, actually were concerned, and wanted to change or really wanted to be involved, they would have taken action at the ballot box, or they would have been up here every single week, week in, week out. So please, go ahead and do this and absolutely show the citizens of this town exactly what their apathy is buying them. I mean, please, go ahead. It's going to stretch the services of the city, police, fire, code enforcement, solid waste, roads, sewer, water, all of it. Go ahead, stretch it out even more. All of this wonderful foresight that we keep having, obviously that's in the plan somewhere. So on that, by all means, please, go ahead, do it. Absolutely, enthusiastically, I want you to do it. And, I mean, the consequences be damned. I mean, it really doesn't matter at this point, does it? It's going to happen. And since the election is over, and the people, 2,600 people or so who voted based on all of this, people have not spoken, they barely mumbled. So on that, one slightly off-topic thing, the election's over, give us back our full free speech rights.
Sean Price, you have 4 minutes.
City Council. No. That's right, we don't have that other one there. Does that work?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I've risen on citizens' comments here. So if you look at the agenda tonight, 6, 7, 8, 9, if you combine those, right, I'm wondering what the warranty is on those items. Do we have a warranty as a city? Are we buying a warranty for these items? Because Bunny Trail Road was just installed, and it's already messed up in 5 years. So, from my understanding, right? Repaved just 5 years ago, and now we're repaving it again, or redesigning it and re-identifying it, however you want to call it. So I just wonder what the warranty is, and how long that warranty would actually come from when we purchase these items for these buildings or repairing these roads. Then item 11, why are we paying to move the AWAS at the hobby field, Skylark? Why wasn't it the individual that's doing the amphitheater, why wasn't that part of their purchase agreement to move that out of the way? Or who's at fault or having that foresight that when that property was sold, that the AWAS had to be moved? So we're incurring as a city all the money to move the AWAS system because foresight wasn't in play. So, and then with the water pressure out on Featherline is like, when will it be resolved? When will the end of low pressure be resolved? What's what's the answer to resolve that issue? Nobody stated anything that's going to resolve that situation at all. Nobody said anything. The city hadn't said zero on how it's going to be resolved. So those are my 3 questions. Thank you.
Melissa Brown, you have 4 minutes.
Madam Mayor, we're having to manually time the
Mr.
citizen comments.
Right, Mr. Cagle's doing the time for me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for bringing it to everyone's attention. You have 4 minutes.
I was curious as to whether the mayor was going to let those citizens who are new to city council meetings aware of the fact that there will not be a public hearing on PH 24-011 tonight, because that public hearing was already held, and so if they want to speak on it, they probably need to do that during citizen comments. The new discussion item that was added to discuss the water pressure concerns along Featherline Road says the city is going to have the evaluation of the effect of 600 new houses in that area done during the water and wastewater master plan that we will be paying for, that will be coming up in the future. So does it make sense to approve zoning for R1 for 200 acres before we know what the effect of that is going to be? And remember that it's not just that, it's the cumulative effect of everything else in that area. Council has said to the paper and to citizens, well, we have to do this because we need the property tax revenue, and as ag, it's not really bringing us property tax revenue. This is the exact same council who just voted to give up a 99-year land lease for property exemptions to a $24 million apartment complex with the potential of maybe being able to get out of it after 15 years, with no money coming in during that time, and half of the council who voted to approve a 75-year land lease with another multi-million-dollar apartment complex that is tax exempt, that we are now getting less than a third of what had been promised to us, with no explanation still. These 600 houses alone are going to be about anywhere between a third and a quarter of the total number of houses that would require an additional solid waste vehicle and at least one driver and routes. To add that, it's going to come off the utility bills. However, it's going to take about 4 to 5 years of all of those houses paying their utility bill to pay for that equipment and that personnel, just to hire them, not even to maintain keeping them on staff and paying for their benefits. This is poorly planned. The citizens have spoken time and time again that they don't want this. If you bother to read any of their comments, listen to them, and I'm just pleading that two council members have enough integrity to listen to what the citizens are saying to them and say, not now or not R1. AR1, where you can have 3 acres per lot, sell them for a lot of money, not have to worry so much about the wetlands, the erosion, the runoff, the flooding, the floodplains, because you can build around that, and it's something we're severely lacking in the city anyway. We're not lacking R1s. They've been approved. We just need to get the builders to go out and build what has already been approved by the council. If they do that, then we don't have a deficit at all. We have to think we've got Anthem Park. We're going to be doing solid waste for the mud for Turnbow Ranch. That's part of our contract and our agreement with them. We've got Thousand Oaks that's coming. We've got 400 houses coming off of 195 near Reese Creek right now. We keep approving and approving and approving as they will deal with the consequences later on down the road. Well, it's later on down the road, and those consequences still haven't been dealt with from all of the previous building. So if we could, in this one instance, just show a little bit of respect for people who live there, the concerns for the existing community, and say, not yet. Let's figure out
Your
what all the
time is up.
effects are.
Thank you.
And then we'll come back and
Anka
revisit it.
Nagu, you have 4 minutes.
Oh,
This one? Madam Mayor, is it working? City Council. I'm speaking on the water pressure issues on Feather Line Road. A little bit of background on how water systems are designed. When a large subdivision is designed, often the engineer deems necessary to run a water model before anything is built, just to make sure that it works. And there is a software, it's called EPA Net, anybody can look it up. It's free and it's extremely useful for engineers. And when you create a model using EPA Net, I'm sure there's other software that they can use, but you can predict how the system will behave, how the water pressure will be at different places along the subdivision. The water pressure you get at the house depends, first of all, depends on the available water pressure at the fire hydrant. That's the first step that you do, get the pressure at the fire hydrant. And the pressure you get at the house depends on the network, the fittings, the pipe size, and so on, the length of the pipe, and so on. This EPA Net software can calculate how much the water pressure is affected and what kind of water pressure you get at different places in the subdivision. That's why it's important to do a model before anything is built. In my experience, having 35 PSI at the fire hydrant is extremely low. By the time you get to the house, it's way too low. When we run the model, we also look at the worst-case scenario, and the worst-case scenario is when you apply residential use and also fire flow at the lowest elevation. And then you run the model, and you make sure that there's no point in the model, there's no node where the pressure is lower than 20 PSI. That's just a criteria, that's if there's a fire in a neighborhood, and they use a lot of water to put out the fire, what happens to the water pressure? And that's how we make sure. If there is any water pressure when we run the model and the water pressure is 15 PSI, we know it's not going to work. We have to make changes. We can change pipe sizes, fittings, locations, or add more connections to the water. To existing other water systems in the neighborhood. We usually do 2 connections to make sure that the entire system gets enough pressure. And just to give you an example, at Heritage Oaks, when phase 1 was done, when we measured the existing available water pressure before any house was built, the static water pressure was 119 PSI. It was very high. It was very high. It's unusually high. And by comparison, if you're I've never seen anything less than 65 PSI at the fire hydrant. And when you run the model and you apply the different demands, including the fire flow, that 65 PSI, in the end, at the lowest pressure, it's going to be considerably less than that. Also, the location of the house, of course, the higher the elevation of the house is, the less pressure you'll have because the water has to fight to get to the elevation, and it loses pressure. Anyway, from what I've seen, the results of the tests done so far.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
James Seals, you have 4 minutes. Is the timer working, Madam Secretary?
No, ma'am, it keeps turning on and off.
Okay, could you put 4 minutes up there to see if it can work? Okay.
I'm good with 6, too. It's up to y'all.
All right, whenever you're ready, sir.
You should have these slides in front of you. So when I initially presented these issues, I was told that they would be solved during plating. Then we got into talking about plating, and then I was told that this is a zoning request only. So, what I've printed out is the guidelines in the City of FAR versus Tippett, on what the city council is to take into consideration on decisions for zoning requests. So the next slide is the floodplains and the pictures of my property. And as you can see, there's significant flooding that occurs on Llewellyn Lane that crosses the road, as well as on my property itself. Everything abutting the rezoned properties to Llewellyn has this flooding issue. Every single property. We all feed that floodplain. Those massive tanks that are on those properties, all that water comes from Llewellyn Lane, down Douglas Mountain, down Stagecoach to Llewellyn. So, you know, when you look at that, that floodplain itself is roughly 15 acres. And Mr. Cagle, you asked why Y'all Ranch wasn't interconnected between Shawlands and Glen Hill Court. It's because that floodplain splits it. You can't build houses on it, and you can't build roads on it. Okay? The next slide, as I stated before, Featherline Road does not meet section 26-101 for a minor arterial of pavement width. Right now, Featherline Road is 30 feet maximum. For a minor arterial, the minimum amount of feet is 48 to 73. Okay? Furthermore, since 2022, Featherline has had 16 crashes, which is significantly higher per mile than other two-lane roads or nearby roads in the area. 2,300 homes on a 1-mile road, which services a police headquarters, high school, middle school, and commercial gas stations, is textbook overcrowding of land and undue concentration of population. You're also impacting the provisioning of transportation, even for the police, and causing more congestion, not lessening, in the streets and impacting the neighborhood lands and general welfare of the residents. Next slide. As for need, Mr. Segarra, you said that there was no need to widen Featherline Road in the past. Just so you're aware, you approved this agenda item on June 10th, 2014, when Mr. Osborne briefed the council and Mr. Cosper on the need to widen Featherline Road. And if you don't believe me when I say the road needs to meet code and be widened, the landowners and developer in their request stated Featherline Road will likely need to be improved as designated in the 2015 thoroughfare plan to support the City of Killeen's police headquarters, Y'all Ranch, Chaparral High School, and this subject property. Mr. Boyd and others, I've found numerous statements where you have opposed previous zoning requests due to lack of supporting roads and infrastructure. Mr. Boyd, you've stated you are not comfortable saying yes to knowing that we are going to have to hope and wait for a road to be developed. Next slide. Based on the Bell County Platts website, right now there are 1,441 homes in or under development. And I've listed out Y'all Ranch, Turnbow Ranch, Levi Crossing, Thousand Oaks, Victory Ranch, and Heritage Oaks. I gave you every phase and every home that's being developed right now. So part of that Supreme Court is how can you actually justify there is a substantial public need or purpose for this new zoning? For perspective, can I ask for one more minute, please? An extension, please?
So you haven't finished your 4 minutes.
Okay. For perspective, you aren't making a today decision or a 10-year decision. You're making a lifetime decision for everyone around these properties if you don't have the infrastructure in place first. Approving this request today will negatively impact so many people's lives, their properties, and their overall safety. Can I ask for an extension, please, 1 minute? Thank you so much. You know, a few weeks ago, we couldn't even really discuss water pressure issues. And I'm telling you today, based on the Supreme Court guidelines, these are very relevant facts that we should be discussing for zoning requests, not platting. These are the guidelines and considerations that you're to make today, not in platting. If you're not comfortable, if you can't sit there and look at all those questions and what I've highlighted on each of those slides and justify wholly with everything you know that you have enough information that this zoning is not going to impact those, then you can disapprove it today. You aren't facilitating safe and adequate transportation. You're not lessening congestion on the streets. You're causing impacts to neighboring lands. And as I've proven, there's no substantial need, that's a key word, substantial need for this zoning at this time. There's no repercussions in disapproving this today. You can disapprove it, go back to the developer and the staff, formulate a better plan. Let's get Featherline safe and to code.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Elizabeth Niski? Good evening. You have 4 minutes.
Hello. Congratulations, Madam
you.
Mayor and council members. My name's Elizabeth, and I live in Y'all Ranch. I love Y'all Ranch. I've been there for 12 years. It's a wonderful community. When I first moved in there, Stagecoach was already in the funding process, already finished with the planning process, and was already being built when I moved into Y'all Ranch. It was all farmland all around, all agricultural, so there wasn't necessarily an issue in comparison to today. So when you say that, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Let me go back to what I wrote here. I would like to say that if this rezoning request were to be approved, I want the land to remain undeveloped until the infrastructure in the Featherline area is complete. If that is not possible or practical, then please disapprove this zoning request today. I feel that a development of a neighborhood should not be approved until it is actually needed. There are many homes that have been sitting on the market for a while in Y'all Ranch. There's a lot of for sale signs that I pass by on my way home. We also have several neighborhoods that are already in the process of being built within close proximity to the Featherline area, which is kind of the point that I was making before. There weren't multiple neighborhoods being built at the same time as comparison to when Y'all Ranch was first being built, when it was not as dramatic. Additionally, please consider the safety of citizens first, as there is a great need for lighting and sidewalks in the area. There's a lot of children that walk to and from school and in that area there, and I feel that it will likely increase when the middle school opens as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Leo Gukaisen, you have 4 minutes.
Good evening. Oh, sorry. I'm used to this one. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, and city manager and residents. I'm here today to talk about this rezoning off of Featherline. First, I would like to say that listening to comments made by persons on the record last time this was brought up, and by comments from this body, regarding the actions of the P&Z. I am only speaking for myself. I am not speaking for anybody else. But I personally took offense to those comments, all right? Because we look at more than just one little item. We listen to the people who come in and take time out of their schedules to talk to us about issues, either they're pro or con. We listen. And we discussed issues regarding this matter. We kind of look outside the box, because this is not the only time that the council will see this. When it comes back for the plotting, it does not come here. It comes with us to the P&Z. And by law, as long as the staff says it meets all our city requirements, we have to approve it, even though we voted against it beforehand. If we vote it down, then we probably put the city in jeopardy of a lawsuit. The requested that this is going to bring is it's already going to hurt our city's services that are stretched thin now, both fire, police, utilities. You know, we're going to have to bring more people online to support this. And we're having issues right now with what we have. Another issue was brought up is a safety issue. We looked at the safety issue. You know, KISD decided to put a high school out there, now they're putting another school out there. Kids are walking up and down that street. It's not ready, or what I would call compatible, to having students, young kids, walking up and down there. The traffic is going to be more congested. I have a fact on that, because one day I had attended an event at Chaparral High School, And when I turned down Featherline, I got right between, I think it was the last Y'all Ranch sign and the police department. Traffic was backed up. It took me 45 minutes to get from there to Chaparral to make a left to go to the high school. And that was around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I could imagine what the traffic is like on that road in the morning and the evening time when the kids are released. We need to fix the infrastructure first. In my opinion, Featherline is not ready to be used for what it's going to be. We know that. This body knows it because you're looking at getting it fixed. But again, those things do take time, and we understand that. But putting all these houses out there at one time is going to add to the problem before the problem gets fixed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steve Overby, you have 4 minutes, sir.
My name is Stephen Overby. I'm here to speak for some of the people on Featherline. I live over on Onion Road. I'm part of what the donut hole. Everybody remembers the donut hole. 20 years ago almost, you guys annexed us in and promised us lots of things. You promised us curbing, you promised us sidewalks, you promised to clean out Tremere Creek. Nothing that you said that you would do 20 years ago you have done in the donut hole. If we had, we'd have all the good things that you promised. And I just don't want to see you go and annex more land in and make promises to do things when I know for a fact, I've been out there for 42 years, you've never done anything. I got a trash can out of the deal of you annexing us in and higher taxes. That's all I got. That's all you've ever given me. So until you can meet what you said you would do 20 years ago, quit annexing in land. Your Stagecoach, your Onion Road, the roads are in terrible shape. It's like a dirt road that you're driving on, and now you're wanting to pick up more. Now, my water pressure is fine. Please don't mess with it. But, you guys need to think real hard about taking in more land when 20 years ago, you made me promises that you've never done. Never done. So please think real hard about it before you do it. I know none of you guys were here when we were annexed in. I know everybody there didn't want to be annexed in, and I'm sure now they don't want to be annexed in. So stop until you can fix what you have already. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
And for the public record, tonight, we're not talking about annexing anything. Mrs. Kelly Seals.
Hi, good evening, council members and mayor. I want to start by saying thank you for your time this evening. I am here once again to ask you to disapprove the rezoning of the 195 acres off of Featherline. At the last meeting, one of the things that you asked to Mr. Cosper was why the Planning and Zoning Committee turned it down. I'm not sure why you would ask him. He wasn't there, but I appreciate Leo for showing up and explaining why. And then you asked I feel that the question should have been asked to your Planning and Zoning Committee at that time. Texas statute states that you should be considering if the rezoning will lessen congestion on the street. And you all know from public comment that this rezoning will not lessen, it will only make it worse. Although staff and developers keep saying that this is to be addressed during the platting, Texas statutes will tell you that this is not true. Just because the comprehensive plan states that it will eventually become some sort of residential area does not mean that you shouldn't improve the infrastructure before the approval. It also says that you should consider if there's a substantial public need for new zoning. I believe you know as well as anyone else there is not a current need with more houses going up in the area. It appears as though when the city approves it, they're just trying to fill empty land with more homes. There are over 1,000 homes currently for sale in Killeen, plus the other homes that are being built within a 300-mile radius. There is not a substantial need for 600-plus houses. Mr. Segarra, you said when we met last time that they won't build the 600 homes at once. That is true. You also said it would be something like 15 to 20 houses a year. You are vastly underestimating the number of houses that a builder will build within 1 year. When I bought my first house in Killeen, I watched as other houses in the neighborhood were being built. I watched two-story homes across the street from me be built in under a month. This was while other houses were being built simultaneously. Mr. Boyd, when it came to the Thousand Oaks subdivision in the newspaper, you were quoted. I'm going to echo some of the concerns of the citizens. The road infrastructure is not in place. It is a problem. I am not comfortable saying yes to this, knowing that we're going to have to hope and wait for the road to get developed. End quote. Mr. Boyd, I am asking you to echo the concerns of the citizens and disapprove tonight for all the same reasons you previously disapproved. Council members, you were told that 29 of 198 people that were sent rezoning orders signed the petition to disapprove the rezoning. This is true, but you were not given the big picture. The fact is that of those 29 people, they account for 73% of the land around the rezoning area that opposes it. Council members, I am begging that you listen to your citizens in the community. Over 300 people reached out to the Killeen Daily Herald via Nextdoor, Facebook, and email opposing the rezoning. Do what's right for your city, not for the builder's pocket. Please vote to oppose this rezoning.
Councilmember Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to take a moment to bring some clarification to the two references that were made. Those were my statements for that development. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a subsequent meeting where I determined, just through research, that it would be penalizing the development by not, by focusing just on the city infrastructure at that time. And so my position actually changed on that. Thank you.
And also, I want to address, when I asked Mr. Cosper in reference to the planning and zoning give an answer, I believe if something is rejected, and maybe we need to look at that, council, if we turn down some of that planning and zoning, when they come to us, we don't have all the facts. So if you want us to know what happened at the planning and zoning, and once you turn down someone, have the common courtesy to send us at least a memo or call us or email and say, hey, this was rejected, this is why, that falls upon the chair. So when they come here and we don't know, and this is a very important matter, extremely important, you need facts. You can't make decisions based on anything but facts. So if he doesn't know and we don't know, the council's going into this blind, and they following whatever other citizens that's given their comments. I heard everyone that has spoken today, but as you know, I don't vote, but I'm listening. And I do reply, sir, to your emails, every last one of them. Thank you. With that being said, Madam Secretary, consent agenda.
MN 24010, consider minutes of regular city council meeting of April 9th, 2024. RS 24075, consider memorandum resolution entering into a contract with Def Link Incorporated for the accessible hazard alert system in the amount of $113,133. RS 24076, consider a memorandum resolution approving the purchase and installation of equipment for the outdoor warning siren capital improvement project from Federal Signal in the amount of $99,952.80. RS 24077, consider a memorandum resolution amending the previously authorized spending limit for the purchase of police uniforms, duty gear, and accessories from Galls LLC from $50,000 to an amount not to exceed $78,000 for FY 23-24. RS 24078, consider a memorandum resolution approving a firework display permit application at the Killeen Athletic Complex on July 6, 2024. RS 24079, consider a memorandum resolution authorizing the purchase to replace the interior doors at the Killeen Civic and Conference Center from Integrity One Solutions, an amount of $82,558. RS 24080, consider a memorandum resolution authorizing the purchase to replace the existing HVAC control system at the Killeen Civic and Conference Center from TempSat Controls in an amount of $179,220. RS 24081, Consider a memorandum resolution awarding bid number 2415 HVAC replacement at the Killeen Civic and Conference Center to the Brandt Companies in the amount of $1,448,000. RS 24082, consider a memorandum resolution awarding bid number 2413 Bunny Trail Reconstruction to R.T. Schneider Construction Company Limited in the amount of $5,814,102.64. RS 24083, consider a memorandum resolution authorizing the execution of a professional services agreement with CP&Y for the design of the Lift Station Number 1 rehabilitation project in the amount of $321,375. RS 24084, consider a memorandum resolution approving a reimbursable agreement with the Department of Transportation Federal Aviation Administration for the Skylark Field Automated Weather Observation System relocation in the amount of $145,345.84.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Councilmember Adams.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Councilmember Boyd.
Second.
All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilmember Cobb, is that a yes or no?
It is a yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Discussion items, Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
DS 24032, discuss water pressure concerns along Featherline Road.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Kanye.
Madam Mayor, if I may rise to a point of, I'm not sure which it is, but the system is going in and out of the,
Well, yes, we know they have problems.
okay.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. As we've been talking about this zoning case in regards to the 195 acres on the west side of Featherline, and there's been quite a few different citizens that have come forward and spoke about low pressure concerns. So we thought as staff it would be really good to kind of bring to you some history, what's been done over the last couple of years in regards to this issue, especially in the Yale Ranch area. As has been spoken about before, the TCEQ, the mandate is, or the requirement is that in the main, which brings the water into the development or the subdivision, and that's where you have your fire hydrants off, that the minimum pressure is 35 PSI within the main. As we've received calls over the last couple of years, and I'm going to shift over to a map that will kind of bring into light some of those different areas. First off, this map is a pressure plane map. So in the blue, that's all the upper pressure plane. The green is the lower pressure plane. You can see that Featherline kind of splits it. So we actually have a 16-inch main that goes up the east side of Featherline that serves the lower pressure plane, and we have an 8-inch main that parallels that on the east side of Featherline that serves the west side in the upper pressure plane. Now the big difference here is the upper pressure plane actually, if we just had common elevation, so like if you went from one side of the blue over to the green and the elevation was the same, the pressure when no water is flowing through those pipes, which we call static pressure, is going to be 54 PSI higher in the blue section. And as you see, the whole area that we're talking about, this 195 acres, it is in that blue section. So it's in that upper pressure plane. So from a static standpoint, there should be no issues whatsoever. And we'll get a little bit further in the presentation, and I'll talk to what Anko had brought up is in regards to hydraulic models and what's done with that as well. So let me go back to the three different areas. And as calls came forward over the past couple of years, again, it was in these three areas. The first was Shawlands Road, which was more, it's on the northern part. And if you remember from the map, that part is actually blue now. So a couple of years ago, in August of of 2022, we were getting some pressures that were getting close to that 35 PSI. And so as I looked at that, again, that's the highest elevation that we have within the Yow Ranch area. And so just from a static standpoint, yes, those pressures were lower, being that it was in the lower pressure plane. So what we did 2 years ago, August of 2022, is we tied that area, and you saw it on the map. It's the only area over in the green part that's actually blue. It was tied in, and it's Shawlands Drive, and then a little bit south before you get to the drainage feature through there. So again, that was tied into the upper pressure plane, and on April the 12th, staff went out and tested and registered water main pressures. And at the fire hydrant, they were at 80 PSI. 5 houses along Shawlands, they ranged anywhere from 65 to 80 PSI. And again, we'll talk a little bit more. It's about elevation. And also you can have pressure reducing valves that are there that are going to reduce that pressure somewhat. So Shawlands Road was fixed as far as any kind of pressure concerns back in August of 2022. Cricklewood Drive, which is about halfway down as you go south, we began to get calls with it around the summer of 2023. And some of those calls then apparently must have made their way to the TCEQ. And so the TCEQ came out in September 19th through the 26th, and they put on a 24/7 continuous monitor of a pressure gauge on the fire hydrant. So as they monitored those over those 7 days, never did the pressure fall below 35 PSI. So there was no violations from the TCEQ about low water pressures. At the end of the presentation, there's actually the letter that came from the TCEQ that states that. Then there was no violations. On April the 12th of 2024, staff registered water pressures along Cricklewood Drive, and we found an interesting thing because the main pressure was at 50 PSI. But then we also, just as we did at each of the 3 locations, we took houses along the drive, 5 different houses. And those pressures, I think there was 2 of them at 50, there was 2 at 35 PSI, and then there was this one at 23 PSI. And we're like, what's going on here? If the main is 50, why do you have at the house this lower pressure? So as we began to look into that, we saw that there are what's called pressure reducing valves, okay? And that pressure reducing valve is downstream of the water meter. So it's on the private side. So apparently when the builder put in that home, as they registered the pressure there, they felt it was too high. So they put in this pressure reducing valve to lower that pressure, all right? And so we notified those 3 homes specifically, because those are the ones that we were looking at, that you've got a pressure reducing valve. You need to basically call a plumber, and they can adjust that valve, or even better is just take it completely out. But again, that's on the private side, so we can't really touch that. And then finally on Aubrey Catherine, that one as well, and that's on the far south end, kind of closer towards Chaparral. And then what was going on in the summer of 2023 is the new high school was being built. And so as we took a look at that, and we were monitoring those pressures when calls came in, first thing we normally do is we'll put pressure recorders on fire hydrants. And so through most of the summer in that area of the summer of 2023, we had pressure recorders there monitoring those pressures to make sure that we weren't falling below 35 PSI. But one of the things we found was, and we spent a lot of time as staff looking at this issue throughout different ways of why is it that maybe the pressures are dropping and things like that at different times. There was a couple of things we found, and we were able to adjust some valves, which helped greatly. The other thing was the high school was online. They were doing a large amount of irrigation, trying to get their sod established and things like that. So we spoke with KISD, and they were great about beginning to irrigate in more off-peak hours. So that helped. The other thing we knew, though, what really needed to happen is the Chaparral elevated storage tank needed to be able to come online to completely solve all this issue. And so in January of 2024, that happened. And so since that time, again, from everything that I hear, we haven't heard anything about low pressures. On April 12th, again, the staff went out and registered, and they found 62 PSI at one of the fire hydrants in 5 houses along Aubrey Catherine. We're at anywhere from 60 to 63 PSI. Again, that was the map that we had talked about. That's the letter from the TCEQ. And just a little bit of additional, because again, and Mr. Cagle was so great about this as far as we need to get out there and make sure on this. So it was about a week and a half ago on May the 3rd that KDH staff and concerned citizens came out, and we met with other city employees as well. And so we first met at Shawlands Drive and recorded the pressure, and you may have seen the video that was online within the paper in regards to this, and we found 64 PSI at the main on Shawlands Drive. Glen Hill Court's a little bit further to the south across the ditch, and it was at 50 PSI. So again, in the mains, the pressure's always been well above the 35 PSI, where again, we're required to stay at. There was some discussion about hydraulic models, and this next bullet point is, basically that Freese and Nichols is currently working on the next water and sewer master plan. Part of that master planning process is you do a hydraulic model, a complete model on the entire water distribution system. They also do one on the sewer collection system as well. So they will be looking at all of this. And again, the one we did before was in 2019. So every about 5 years, we're updating that model and looking at it if there's any kind of areas of concern. So they will take a close look at this entire area. They actually helped us too when we were trying to figure out why, again, back in the summer of 2023, what was going on with that. They helped with using the model to help us find some of those issues as well. But so they will look at, again, I talked about static pressure, basically just based on elevation. All right. You live in a lower elevation, your pressure is going to be higher. You live up higher, it's going to be lower. Okay, it's the difference between wherever your house is, that elevation, and the water in that elevated storage tank is what makes that static pressure. Okay, but then as that water is flowing through the pipes, because of friction, you're losing pressure as it flows through those pipes. All right, so this is where a hydraulic model is critical, because it takes those actual pipe sizes, then you put, again, they'll actually put a couple of different fires that they'll put into the model, and checking the different nodes, as Annika said, as far as what are those pressures doing, to be able to find out what's happening in a dynamic way. So we call this, your dynamic pressure, when everything is flowing and moving. All right. Again, remember, this whole area is in the upper pressure plane. From a static standpoint, there is going to be no problems. What will have to really be looked at, though, is again, as that water is flowing through that 8-inch line, is there going to be too much pressure loss going through that? The model will then be able to tell us, okay, that needs to be upsized, or that area needs to be looped in to the 12-inch that's along Tremere. So that model will give us an enormous amount of information, and that will be coming, that master plan is scheduled to be completed by the end of the year. So I guess in conclusion, all of the tests and everything that we've done, and again, we have the water and sewer staff has spent an enormous amount of time on this issue over the past 2 years. And I take great pride in all of the things that they have done to again, help resolve these things and to find the issues and what was going on. But again, overall, the pressure is over 35 PSI. And the last thing to be able to say, and I really want to drive this point home, because, just being very honest, I take great pride in what we're able to do in this city, especially on the water and sewer side. And so when, there's people complaining about something with pressure or whatever, I mean, I lose sleep at times over that. That's kind of crazy, but I do. And so spend a lot of time with that. But again, we don't know of those problems unless citizens call and tell us of the problem. So instead of it coming to forward in this kind of avenue, it would really be great. And I encourage all of the citizens out there, if you feel like the water is trickling out of your faucet or something, please call the manager of water and sewer operations, and there's his phone number, 501-6305. And there will be someone within water and sewer that will be there to look at. And again, for some reason, there are areas within Yow Ranch that there were pressure reducing valves put in. So again, that can be checked. And if it is, then that can be resolved. So don't just stay there with trickling water. Call somebody, do something about it, and then we'll help you with that issue. So with that, I'd love to answer any more questions you may have.
Thank you for that update, and Councilmember Solomon, thank you for requesting that item to be on the agenda. And I agree with you. It shouldn't be a rezoning matter to come to the council meeting to say my water is tripping. Because if I'm paying for my water bill, I'm going to show up to your office way before that. So I agree with you, and I thank you for that. Councilmember Boyd?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I don't have any questions. I'm just going to, as was stated before, echo a lot of what you guys have already well explained. So thank you for the presentation. 5 key takeaways I've taken away from this is that Yow Ranch, located east of Featherline Road, is part of the lower pressure plane, while the proposed development is located on the upper pressure plane. 2 different transactions. TCEQ issued a letter to the city where they stated your public water supply continues to merit recognition as a superior water system, stating no violations. Those are their words, not ours. Last week, city staff, to include our city manager and Councilmember Solomon, met with the local newspaper and concerned citizens at different addresses to test specific areas for water pressure. And the water was recorded at 50 PSI and higher. Teresa Nichols will be evaluating the impact of any future development in that area. And the last one, all tests performed on water pressures in Featherline area are above 35 PSI. Those are the facts. And just to echo what you just said, sir, if there's an issue, reach out to city staff. They will go check it out. I am sure of that. Thank you.
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know I think year before last, when I was a District 2 rep, I brought that issue up with you and Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Zagers, and I didn't even know there was a such thing as a low and high pressure plane. Thanks for fixing that. And I know in that same period, I had asked the fire chief to talk about ISO ratings, and I think there was a survey done to make sure we meet the pressure for ISO level 1. If you can just nod your head or no, thanks. The hydrant issue is not an issue, because that would be a real problem, because insurance rate would go up if our hydrants are down. But can I guess I know we have the public hearing later afterwards. What the current water structure, what can it maintain? Like, you got a request or rezoning request coming. I know there's other bills. What impact does that have on our current capability to provide the right water pressure and the right water to that area? If you can answer that now.
Sure. Yeah, again, and I think you need to separate that upper and that lower pressure plane. The Yow Ranch areas we just kind of went through, that's lower, most of it's lower, and all of that is fine. This new development doesn't even impact that. One of the things that was stated before too, that that the upper feeds the lower, that's completely wrong. It does not do that. And so again, that there should not be any kind of problems statically. Again, the model will be able to tell us, as far as that water's flowing through the pipe, if something does need to be upsized or something like that. And that's what the whole master plan is about, and that's where you then CIP projects generate out of that to be able to upsize or do things in areas that are maybe a little more critical to be able to help resolve those issues.
Okay. And can you give us a roundabout time when you're ready to present? I guess, I don't know if we're going to present to the public first or to the council in general when we approve it, the wastewater master plan.
Sure, the water and wastewater master plan, again, is scheduled to be completed by the end of this calendar year.
Okay.
And at that time, then probably it will be Friesen Nichols who's doing that model for us. In that master plan, they'll probably present the entire master plan, to council. They will.
All right. Thank you for your presentation and your questions, and your answers, rather.
Woman Cobb, do you have any comments?
This is a very hard decision. And simply because I live on Onion Road, and I have seen the joys and the discomforts of my neighbors, and I hear them tonight, and I am going to rest on that.
Thank you. All right, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Zager. Thank you. Our next item is the ordinance 13 PH 24-011. Last week, we had a public hearing. The item was discussed. The council made a decision to table this item. This item is only coming back for a vote. In order for this item to pass, there must be 6 yes for this item to pass. Madam Secretary.
PH 24011. Consider an ordinance requested by TCG Engineering on behalf of GWC Holdings LLC and McLean Commercial Ltd, case number Z2404, to rezone approximately 195.04 acres out of the WH Cole Survey, abstract number 200, from A, Agricultural District to R1, Single Family Residential District. The subject property is generally located on the west side of Featherline Drive, west of the intersection of Malmason Road, Killeen, Texas. Requires a 3/4 majority vote. The caption of the ordinance reads, "An ordinance amending the City of Killeen zoning ordinance by amending the zoning of approximately 195.04 acres out of the WH Cole Survey, abstract number 200, from A, Agricultural District to R1, Single Family Residential District, providing a savings clause, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for an effective date."
Thank you. Council, Mr. Rivera presented last week. Would you like for him to present again?
I would.
Anybody else? Mr. Rivera. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Mayor and council, this is a request to rezone property from agriculture to single family. The star on the map shows the approximate location. This is an aerial showing the entire plot. This is about 195 acres of property. Again, the request is to rezone from agriculture to single family. If approved, the applicant intends to build approximately 600 detached single-family homes on the property. This is a view of the subject property looking to the north towards Stagecoach, looking to the south towards Chaparral, looking to the east across to Yow Ranch, and then also to the west. The property or this request comports with the comprehensive plan and the future land use plan. It's part of the residential mix, which allows up to 25% non-residential and 95% residential. And again, this is consistent. And I will take a pause here. If you recall, Yow Ranch has a density that's probably about 5 or so lots per acre. This particular development probably is about 3, because you got like 200. Grossly speaking, you've got 200 acres, right? 600 lots. In addition to that, The property, and let me just go back to the map, because I want to make a point. The property here, these houses are generally about on 1 acre lots. These houses generally here are on about a half an acre lot. And so again, in terms of meeting mixed requirements, and if you look at it, you've got high density here, you got low density here, and you got this that's in between. Okay. As soon as the slides cooperate. In terms of controlled growth, again, I want to restate, controlled growth does not mean no growth. If you read the definition of controlled growth, it makes it very clear that development is allowed, but that development must be done in such a way that you make sure that you meet the principles of the comp plan. Specifically, those principles talk about building neighborhoods and not just subdivisions. And again, for this particular development, that will be done because you, the council, put those kinds of policies in place already. You put a policy in place that deals with architectural standards so that you don't have repetition. You put a policy in place that deals with having street trees on either side of the street and sidewalks so that the community is walkable. That's already in place. You put standards in place to make sure that whenever pavement is done, it's done in such a way that that design life is at least 20 years. For a few years ago, those kinds of standards that ensure that you're building neighborhoods and not just subdivisions were not in place. So you put that in place already. So that's one thing that you look for when you're in controlled growth, and you all have already baked that into the policies. The second thing you look at is it fiscally responsible? You know, because the comp plan talks about that if you look across all acres, in order for a property to address services that are provided, it requires that property yields revenue, tax revenue, to the tune of $3,350 for every acre. That's what the comp plan says. So a lot of people have been referring to the comp plan. It says for every acre, it should yield tax revenue of $3,350 to break even on city services, fire services, police services, and also services associated with maintaining the infrastructure. So what does that look like for this property? Well, currently, the tax revenues that come from this property is about $4,000, okay? So that's not necessarily meeting that break even, $4,000 across 200 acres, where the comp plan talks about $3,350 across 1 acre. If this property is developed, and let's say, for instance, there are 600 homes, and let's say the average value of those homes is about $250,000, you could have a property yield in terms of property taxes in excess of $900,000. And again, that number there compared to the $3,350 for break even exceeds that number. So if you ask the question, is this development fiscally responsible and sustainable? Yes, it is. And is it being done in such a way that it's having the least impact upon land? I believe that it is. They're not proposing a high-density development, which would also be allowed by the residential mix. They're proposing something that's relatively mild, and as we said before, right there in between a high-density Yao Ranch and low-density to the north and the south. You all are aware of these things, so I'll keep moving. All the public notification was accomplished. We received a number of written responses in opposition. And when you look at the actual area within the boundary extents, that represents about 26.6% of the 200-foot boundary notification. The stars on the map really show the general location of all of the concerns that were shared. And staff is still recommending that this be approved. We believe it's consistent with the comp plan. We also believe that all the concerns associated with water pressure, associated with
water facilities, wastewater facilities, transportation facilities, are all things that are baked into our development process and will be addressed as you walk throughout that process. For instance, as you deal with the roadway, in terms of Featherline, for instance, they will be required to do a traffic impact analysis. And I want to talk about that a little bit more, and I've also have our city engineer, Mr. Zegers, here, who can give even more details. But that traffic impact analysis is very comprehensive. It allows you to look at, okay, what are the current traffic conditions in the area first? What are the current traffic conditions without this project being in place? Looking at that existing, looking at that over 5 years, looking at that over 10 years. And then you compare that against with the project in place and into the future 5 years, into the future 10 years, what would the impact be from that? And where that difference is between the baseline condition, existing conditions, and what the future is saying with the project, then that's where the developer will have to deal with their proportionate share. But the other benefit associated with that is that you understand from that traffic impact analysis what are the baseline concerns even without the development in place. If you understand what those baseline concerns are without the development in place, that gives you an idea of some projects that could possibly be done to address those kinds of issues that have really nothing to do with the developer. So it's really, really important that that traffic impact analysis is something that is done. It's fairly comprehensive because it really does allow you to deal with existing deficiencies as well as deficiencies that may be created by the development. Again, we're recommending approval. This case was heard by Planning and Zoning, and they voted to recommend disapproval by a vote of 5-0, and therefore this will require 6 votes from the City Council in order to be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera, for going back over the slides. The system is messed up. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First question, I know, having served on P&Z as well, platting is a subset of the zoning process, correct? It's a step in at a later stage after whether we approve or disapprove it.
It's a part of the development process.
Thank you.
So all of it's a part of the development process. You have zoning, sometimes you have land use, sometimes you have annexation, but all of that stuff is a part of the development process.
Thank you for correcting my term. So Featherline has been discussed extremely, and I know that people, so service in Korea, I observed how South Koreans building streets, lights in areas going up towards the DMZ that's not even used. And I know we get calls asking build that infrastructure first, and then people will come. And I know in this city, I used to think the developers were the boogeymen. And I will be honest, after some conversations over the last year, I don't think a lot of developers like this council either because of the constraints we placed on them, or the fact that this council wants developers to share in the process of the growth, of the controlled growth. In the case of Featherline, what is the current impact of the traffic? Do you know that right offhand? Does the current road meet the conditions? And I know there's a plan to fix the road, and I know tomorrow we have a K-Tempo meeting. There's a plan to discuss the chaparral build, and I know you're coming back with Stagecoach with the design for that. So I know we have in our immediate plans to fix that. So in the meantime, let me rephrase my question. What would be if we approve this, what would be the projected time for the build out, start of build out?
The start of build out associated with Featherline itself? Okay. I'm going to allow the city engineer, Mrs. Zegers, to address
and
that question.
Would the developer be required to do the traffic based off the TIA? Would they be required to fix those first before the build out? I know. I wanted to understand for the record.
Yes.
So to start off with, if the city wants to do a build or capital project at Featherline, we actually have to create that project, get it approved for council. Right now, we don't have that in the next 5 years. Unless we're directed, we can look at that. And we've already did a kind of a rough estimate right now for us to widen Featherline to a 3-lane road, which is most likely what it needs to be. It's roughly about $11.3 million from Stagecoach to Chaparral. If we need to add signals, if we had to do anything else as we design it, that adds a little bit more to the cost as well. We would have to do a study. We'd have to look at what we need. The benefit of what Edwin said about the development doing a TIA, we kind of get a little jump on that, and we get to find out if there's any issues along Featherline that are in need right now, if we need to put a signal at Malmaison, or we need to do, what could we do at the intersection of Chaparral in conjunction with the county, since right now that's a county road. And that study will help us define that. The nice thing is, with the development coming in, they will also tell us when those improvements need to be done. So if a development comes in and they do a study and they say, well, our impact is we need a right turn lane going to our development. We need a left center turn lane right along at the development, the intersection. We can find out what their proportionate cost is. Is it something that their development's triggering? And if that's the case, they can contribute or they can build it as part of their development. We find out at what phase or how many homes that they will have to have that done, and we can coordinate any approval process with when those improvements are being done and completed. We've done that similar with Mitchell Farms, where they have to do some turn lanes on Clear Creek, and we tied it to their phase 2. They can't get any approval of phase 2 until those improvements are done. And that's the benefit of the TIA in the process that we approved.
And even in this process, going to the floodplains, I know we adopted the FEMA flood plan, and so we're not permitted to approve any bills on that.
Any
on that
improvement
land.
in a floodplain requires FEMA approval. If they want to do any work within a floodplain, then they have to do a study. They do what they call LOMR. They have to do a map revision. If they try to do filling or doing any changes within a floodplain, that is done through our building department and also has to ultimately be approved by FEMA. Ideally, we don't do any approval. We don't allow any improvements in a floodplain at all. So when developers typically will, when they do their subdivisions, they constrain their development to stay outside the floodplain. So that is left alone. Can I say something? And then Edwin can jump in.
And Andrew's completely right. The only thing I want to add, this is a 195-acre site. In terms of environmentally sensitive areas on this site, there's 5 to 6 acres of floodplain and 4 to 5 acres of wetlands. So we're talking about 10 acres of environmentally sensitive area across 195 acres. As Andrew said, there's a good chance that the building can take place around without impacting 10 acres.
Okay. And then if we start building on Featherline land, we have to pay for the widening? Or if we don't approve this, the city will have to pay out of taxpayers' dollars to pay for the widening of the road?
The city will have to pay a portion. I mean, even if a development comes in and they have their proportionate share, the city is still responsible for the other portion.
All right, well, minus the development.
But if a development to come in, then it's all on the city, or we get grants, or we have to find the funding for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Yes, sir.
Only for coming back up and explaining to the council. Is there anybody else? If not, can I get a motion? Mayor Pro Councilwoman Cobb, do you have any questions?
No, ma'am. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand there exists specific opposition to the proposed subdivision development in relation to Featherline Road, water pressure, serviceability, traffic. There were concerns about drainage and road infrastructure. And also, it's also my understanding that the engineering division has reviewed the proposed rezoning, has provided the following responses to the public, which I want to state here, which is regarding water and pressure and serviceability. The area of the development has the needed infrastructure to support the development. There's adequate water pressure and sewer availability, which was outlined in the previous presentation. Traffic. Featherline is currently a 2-lane county road with roadside ditches. The capacity of this 2-lane road is 1,900 vehicles per hour. This would equate to about 3,800 vehicles per hour. The existing road capacity far exceeds the current daily traffic of 8,000 cars per day. In other words, we're currently using about 8% of the total capacity of Featherline, based on engineering studies, the professionals. Road improvement, the city has a long-term plan to widen and improve this corridor to urban design standards. Any improvements to the roadway as it relates to the project is reviewed at the preliminary plat and permit design. A TIA, again, will be required to determine the need for any mitigations along Featherline based on the additional growth. The development will also be required to install sidewalks along the frontage. Drainage was discussed in a previous meeting. Few notes here. This is not another phase to the Jowl Ranch. This is a different development. And I understand some folks don't want it to change out there. Again, I used to live off Onion Road and walk down to the water bill place, as we used to call it, and all that stuff. But we're growing. Those mentioned earlier, multiple subdivisions. The fact is, as Mitchell Farms gets built out, Boggs Ranch gets built out, Mesa Verde, and the other subdivisions, they're going to build houses, and those houses are going to sell, and then there's going to be a need for additional housing. Last time I checked, we were quoted as the fastest growing city in the United States. That is something to keep in mind. We want to stay in alignment with our growth. We heard the comprehensive plan. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And again, controlled growth does not mean no growth. So those are two things I did want to highlight. I think this development is needed. We previously approved the battery storage park that's going to be located on the other side of Featherline. And at that time, I did have a concern whether or not anyone would want to build houses out there. Well, it's determined that there's a need for housing, which is why this case has come up. So with that said, I did have a question for the city manager before I made any type of motion, and this is in regards to the proposed traffic concerns. I know it's like we're beating a dead horse here, but you, as a city manager, what concerns might you have relating to the traffic issue that's proposed on Featherline?
Well, I think we'll get concrete information from a TIA, but the main thing that I see out there is a right turn lane at Chaparral. And we know that the Chaparral-Featherline intersection is going to have an ultimate build out and fix. But in the meantime, I think it would be not that difficult to construct, a temporary right turn lane. I know there have been some requests, and I think that solves the vast majority of the problems.
Sure.
But there have been some complaints about getting out of the subdivision and some requests for signals or three-way stops, and that's just, the signal's probably not going to be able to meet warrants, but because of the low traffic count. I don't even know if it would make it for a three-way stop, but we can certainly test it and see, and those things could probably deal with the majority of the problems out there. As far as the ultimate build out of Featherline, if during the budget discussions this summer, if the council wants to discuss it, we can discuss ways to do that. I mean, I don't want to speak for our engineer, but we don't want to try to build out through the intersection, but from Stagecoach down close to Chaparral and then maybe do some sort of temporary fix at the intersection. Those are things that can be done.
I appreciate that, and that's a potential temporary fix or solution to accommodate some of those concerns. I'd like to request another minute from the council.
Is there
It'd be,
I'm sorry, anybody else so we can move on? Is there a motion?
I asked for another minute.
I'm sorry.
I request another minute from the council.
Okay, do it.
Okay, thank you, guys. Okay, yeah. While I remain sensitive to the citizens' concerns, as I stated before, I find it responsible to accommodate the inescapable growth occurring within this area of the city. And with that said, I'm going to make a motion to approve PH 24-11.
Is there a second to the motion? Councilmember Segar?
I second it.
Any more discussion? Councilwoman Cobb, you have any discussion before we vote?
I do not, ma'am.
Councilmember Adams, you again?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Just-
Councilmember Adams.
I know one of my messages I got was concern of calls for service. Has the fire chief and the police chief had a chance to look at the effect that has on, and I know calls for service does not come from police cars did not leave out the headquarters to go, they're already out on the road. But have you looked at the impact that this rezoning will have?
So you just got a message?
No, not just now. I've gotten emails. I didn't bring it up later. But it's on my list of questions I didn't get a chance to ask.
Good evening, Chief Kubinski.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A 600 home development and an average of 2.7 people per home, and I know how do you say 0.7, that's what the averages that are used. You look at 1,800 persons. We talk about needing a fire station, a full fire station needed for anywhere from 12 to 15,000 people. So we're talking about 10% of that when we talk about a potential of 1,600 people that are going to be living in that area. It's a relatively low call volume for this subdivision.
And I'm going to provide a less scientific answer. You know, I'm not a traffic engineer, and I don't pretend to be one, but sitting from a citizen's perspective, when I look out my window, I look at Chaparral and Featherline, and during certain times of the day, there's congestion, but that congestion usually clears out in 30 to 45 minutes. But anytime you add 600 residents, 600 homes in the area in the soon-to-be future, there is going to be increased cost for service, so there's going to be demand for police services. So and I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I did.
Do you anticipate a constraint?
A constraint
on the department?
Oh, yes. Once it gets fully developed, there will be a demand for services, more police officers in that area.
Okay.
Yes, sir, please.
Question for the city engineer. If this development were approved tonight, what's the quickest timeline a CO could be issued on a new home?
If it gets approved tonight, that's just the zoning, then they have to go through the design and the subdivision review. That takes 1 to 2 years. It would probably be the soonest, probably a year and a half to 2 years by the time everything is all built for that.
Okay, thank you. And Chief Kubinski, can you give us we're building a new fire station actually adjacent to this property. When is that supposed to be finished?
That's correct. That fire station is expected to be completed third quarter of 2025.
Any more clarity before we vote? All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Cobb, is it yes, up, or down?
This is for the vote for the homes, the rezoning for Featherline, correct?
That is correct.
My answer is no.
Okay, thank you. Can you put up the screen? Motion failed, 5-2. Madam Secretary. Councilwoman Cobb and Councilmember Solomon voted no. Madam Secretary.
Yes, ma'am. Public hearings. PH 24013. Hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance submitted by Karen Dearbaum on behalf of J.C. Franklin, case number Z 2407, to rezone Lot 7, Block 1, Sunrise Vista from B3 Local Business District to R3F Multifamily Residential District. The subject property is locally addressed as 1103 Horizon Drive, Killeen, Texas. The caption of the ordinance reads, "An ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Killeen by amending the zoning of Lot 7, Block 1, Sunrise Vista from B3 Local Business District to R3F Multifamily Residential District, providing a savings clause, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for an effective date."
Thank you. Madam Secretary, Council, Mr. Revere went through the slides last week. Would you like him to go back through them? Would the applicant please, would the applicant like to speak? Good evening, ma'am.
Hi
You have
there.
4 minutes.
Thank you for your service to our community. I'm going to read my statement just to be respectful of everybody's time. It's getting late. I am representing the owner of 1103 Horizon, which is a fourplex in the city of Killeen on a street of fourplexes. 1103 Horizon is one of hundreds of properties in our county that has been caught in illegal nonconforming status that was triggered when the zoning structure was changed from that of a pyramid structure for zoning to one where a category where they each stood independent. I believe this change occurred in 2006. City Council was made aware several months ago of the legal nonconforming status becoming a problem in buyers obtaining insurance. For us, it became an issue several months ago when we listed and received an offer to purchase the property. The appraiser discovered the legal nonconforming status and informed the lender, who then declared that they could not loan on the property in the current status. We lost the buyer when we advised there was nothing we could do other than to go through the rezoning process. We lost the buyer when we were advised nothing we could do but that. And currently we are awaiting the results of a new appraisal to see if the owner has lost further funds. Instead of R3 multifamily, the entire street on Horizon is Zone B3. I'm asking the council to grant the rezoning of 1103 Horizon from B3 to R3 effective immediately and consider making correction to the entire street to prevent similar problems for those owners. We are also asking for reimbursement of the owner's fee for the rezoning application. That amount was $610. During the City Council workshop last week, a planning and zoning official was asked the amount of the application, and the response was $500. This was not correct. We were asked to pay $500 plus a $10 processing fee, and then we were asked to spend another $100 for a traffic impact analysis. The $100 additional charge was odd, given that this is a single street with one way in and one way out with a cul-de-sac at the end. Again, this is a correction to the zoning. There was no change to what was happening on the street. When I asked if this was a necessary thing, they said yes, it was. We paid the additional $100. I'm not sure if this was mandated by the state of Texas or if it was a chunks fee that the city just added to the rezoning process. Furthermore, as planning and zoning works to resolve the issues of the legal nonconforming, I ask that this be a high priority item for the planning and zoning department to find a resolution to avoid problems for owners in selling and insuring their properties in the future. This has the potential to have serious ramifications for owners in legal nonconforming status as the industry shifts. I would like to suggest that those citizens should not be charged for the corrections of the zoning of their properties. It is an undue hardship for owners who did nothing to trigger the issue and yet are faced with the adverse consequences of a change made without their knowledge. Owners across Bell County have been hit with dramatic increases in their property taxes and should not have the additional burden of correcting this issue. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Because I know you mentioned that these changes were made without the owner's knowledge. When they originally bought these properties, were they zoned R3 or did they?
No. As I understand, when this area was developed, we were under the pyramid section where we had B3, which covered everything underneath it. So when all this area was developed, everything was B3. As I understand, in 2006, we changed that zoning structure. This owner bought the property in 2003, totally unaware that the zoning had changed, and now he was in B3 commercial. I'm sure many owners across the county are unaware of this change.
And so when they originally bought it, they were able to get regular financing as
Yes.
a multifamily.
Yes.
And so that wasn't an issue. And so it was without their knowledge. And that's kind of why my question is, and this is probably more for the city, I mean, why, she mentioned something about traffic impact analysis. Is that what you got to pay for?
Yeah, it was $100 for a traffic impact analysis. And when I asked why, we're not changing the usage, I was told it was required for this application.
Does anybody on staff know why they have to pay that, Mr. Ravel?
Yes, sir. So as a part of the traffic impact analysis, there has to be a traffic impact analysis worksheet that's completed and submitted. And that's done with every zoning request, so that's just a matter of practice and policy.
Even if it's one property?
Yes, sir.
What?
We don't have the discretion to do other than what the code says.
I understand. You
Yes, sir.
guys are just doing what's there. It's something that we may have to come back and look at.
Yes, sir.
Because these are situations that give rise to us making the necessary changes. And I think that something like that is definitely something that we should look at. And if you're in a cul-de-sac and you're the only property, why the heck do you need a traffic impact analysis? That doesn't make any sense there, but sometimes we just got to fix those things.
Okay.
And I understand, lastly, I just want to say, I made that recommendation last week because I understand, and that's why I made the recommendation that if we can reimburse it, because it is no fault of the owner that the city rezoned it without their knowledge. Had they come in and done that, then that's a different story. But because they did it without their knowledge and they got to rezone, and now they're having issues, and I think that the attorney spoke last week about, not you, the other one. The one that was here, what's her name?
Meshner.
Mesh, I'm sorry. Where is she? There she is. About, doing something, you guys are going to do something for all the other properties, right?
Yes, yes. So we have taken a look across the city and identified a number of properties for which we will do a city-initiated rezoning.
And if we do something like that, are we going to look at, are we going to have to charge all the owners? Or?
No, sir, we will not charge. As a
Yeah.
part of that process, because it's city-initiated,
Yeah.
there won't be a fee.
Okay, and so that's why, if I do make a motion, I'll make that recommendation to reimburse them, so, thank you.
Mr., I'm coming to you legal next. Mr. Revelle,
Yes, ma'am.
do you rezone property without the residents knowing? Do the city do that? Rezone the area without contacting the residents?
Not that I'm aware of.
I didn't think
There's
so.
a notification process that's required by law.
It's by law.
I wasn't here when was done and what was done in the past, so I can't state one way or the other, but I know what the law says.
Because every time we do a rezoning, ever since I've been on
Yes,
here,
ma'am.
a notification goes out. And even Councilmember Harris, when he was on here, he made it sure that it would be a bigger range, and so everyone would know about it, even though it didn't have an impact on them. So it did go out, and that goes to you, Madam Attorney.
Yes, I did want to speak on the waiver of fees or reimbursement of fees. The Texas Constitution generally prohibits the use of government funds for a private purpose, and that does include waivers of fees, reimbursement of fees. The city can waive fees if it finds a public purpose to do so, but in this case, this would benefit one property. And we have talked about a larger city-initiated, larger scale, but in this case, one property owner needed it now and couldn't wait, and so that would only benefit one property owner, so I can't recommend the waiver of fees because of the Texas Constitution
That's why we have an attorney to keep us straight.
Well,
but
except for,
try.
I would submit to you that the council was made aware of this several months ago when buyers were unable to get insurance. And to your point, Ms. Mayor, this was because, as I understand from planning and zoning, this ended up being an issue because of the way the government leaders changed our zoning structure. It wasn't where somebody made an application. This was a sweeping change to our pyramid structure to an independent. And I think that's where the problem came in. And for many years, it was not an issue for appraisers. It wasn't an issue for insurance companies. But now that industry is changing. And so as I talk to different appraisers and I talk to different lenders, they will not be able to lend on any of these properties
Yes,
if they're
ma'am.
legal nonconforming.
Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Mesher, did this happen from the city, or was this a state mandate to rezone that area?
I believe what she's referring to is the change to our zoning ordinance that changed the permitted uses in each zoning district. So she's correct in that prior to a certain time, there was what we called pyramidal zoning, which means that essentially you have B5, which is the most intense commercial district, and everything, including residential, that is allowed in the city was allowed under B5. And in, I think she said 2006 or early 2000s, that pyramidal zoning scheme was changed, which made residential uses allowed in residential districts and commercial uses allowed in commercial districts. And it was that change to the ordinance that made the use non-conforming. So it wasn't a zoning change
It was a council
that
change
made
then?
the property non-conforming. It was a change to the ordinance
It was a
itself.
council. Okay. All right, thank you. With that being said, we're gonna go to public hearing. Public hearing is open. Mrs. Durbaum, would you like to speak again?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Public hearing is closed. Council, what is your pleasure? Councilmember Adams.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve PH. Sorry, the screen went out.
PH-24-013.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Cigar.
Second.
All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Councilwoman Gonzalez, Cobb.
I'm in favor.
That's a yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, would you raise your hand, all in favor? Yes.
Yes.
It's not working right here. Oh, that's working? Okay, 7-0, motion carries. Thank you, council. Madam Secretary.
PH 24014. Hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance amending Chapter 31 of the Killeen Code of Ordinances, providing for outdoor lighting regulations. The caption of the ordinance reads, "An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Killeen, Texas, amending Chapter 31 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Killeen, providing for amendments to the city's land use regulations, providing for outdoor lighting regulations, providing for the repeal of conflicting provisions, providing for a severability clause, providing for a savings clause, providing for publication and an effective date."
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Council, Mr. Revelle went through the slides last week. Would you like him to go back through them?
Nope.
With that being said, public hearing is open. Council, Sean Price. Good evening, sir. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, so when reviewing this, the city ordinance, it's, what is the term? It's vague. So this ordinance is written very vaguely. As I follow is that I can't figure out how chapter, Title 2, Subtitle D, Chapter 4, Section 54.004. In violation of this, is it going to be a Class C or a Class B misdemeanor when fault is indicated in here? And will the fine stem from $100 to $5,000 per day for violation of light trespass? And does it follow suit for Texas Penal Code light pollution standards under 54.004? So, which allows for provisions under the 1987 Act, Section 5419, imprisonment for contempt, and 54.032, quasi-judicial punishment. What would that be? It's not specified, nor is it specified under Chapter 425.001. There's no provision to allow a compelling safety interest for anybody using a light for security reasons, right? So if you have a security light on the front of your house and the light trespasses beyond your curb, you're now in violation. So you can get a $5,000 per day fine for your light and/or imprisoned up to 1 year, according to a misdemeanor, Class C or Class B misdemeanor. So I'm just wondering, we're going to impose this ordinance, and we're not saying what the penalties are going to be in this ordinance, other than that it's just vague. So that's my clarification there, and that there's no exclusion for security lights around homes in residential areas. And to that, whereas all this, I can't find out how it applies to Article 11, Section 5 of the Texas Constitution under Chapter 9. I don't know where we apply this, where it fits in. So if that could be explained, I'm greatly appreciative. Thank you for your time.
Public hearing closed. Ms. Revelle, can you assist with any of those questions? Mrs. Messer? Thank you.
This one? Mayor and council, this may be a better question for the city attorney. Violations of the zoning ordinance are Class C misdemeanor typically.
Okay, thank you.
That's,
If you want to answer, you can.
that's correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Class C misdemeanor, so fine-only offense.
Yes,
And-
ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I make a motion to approve PH 24-014.
Councilmember Adams.
Go ahead. Wholeheartedly second.
All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Council, yes or yes?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Motion carries 7-0. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Madam Mayor, move to adjourn.
Councilmember Adams made the motion. Second by Councilmember Sagara. All in favor? Meeting adjourned.
I've already explained.
Have a good evening.
You too.